Informative and unpredictable, testing the limits like only we can. From Span Enterprises in Rock Hill, South Carolina, it's the Bandit Room. And welcome to the Bandit Room. My name is Charles. Our special guest today is Jarissel, an e-filing expert with ACAwise, and also Mr. Dr. Michael Matthews, a professor of healthcare management at Winthrop University. Thanks for joining the show today, Michael.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks. Could you give a little background as to the work that you do? This is going to be a very kind of ACA healthcare focused show, so kind of give a background as to the work you do.
Well, I'm a professor in healthcare management program, the only AU/PHA certified program in the state of South Carolina in healthcare management. I've worked both in hospitals and tertiary medical teaching colleges. I've worked in both skilled and assisted living. I've over the years also acquired my master's in health administration from the Medical University of South Carolina, and I have my Ph.D. in health services management from the University of Alabama, Birmingham, and I have, double-digit publications, peer-reviewed publications. I kind of quit counting, and I teach college. I teach classes in strategy, health policy, and healthcare marketing.
All right. Well, it's the season for ACA right now as far as businesses are concerned. Businesses are currently working on filing those 1095s, getting everything taken care of for their employees. Jarissel, would you mind talking a little bit about what businesses are going through right now?
Sure. So deadline season is upon us.
Yeah, absolutely.
For those who are brave in paper filing, deadline's in like 2 days.
Okay.
February 28th, and then for those slightly savvier perhaps, we have e-filing deadline on March 2nd, which is this Friday. So we are boots running. We're working hard to get these employers filed on time and filed in compliance with what the IRS is requiring. That in of itself is a feat because there's a lot of gray right now in anything to do with ACA, even in the filing. Being able to educate our employers on what a transition relief means, what exactly it looks like, what penalties they're going to be, open to or susceptible to depending on how they file, is all what I'm handling right now.
Yeah. So March 2nd is the deadline to have it to your employees.
So
absolute deadline to have it given to your employees. Okay. And if you're paper filing, that is the deadline to paper file it.
Exactly.
Gotcha. All right. Fantastic. All right. Let's talk a little bit about ACA. So it's been in the news a little bit. The new tax law that was enacted had some side effects on the Affordable Care Act. So the individual mandate still technically on the books.
The individual mandate wasn't actually removed. What it was the penalty.
The penalty for the individual mandate.
So it's a toothless mandate.
Right.
Yes.
So you have to buy insurance, but nothing bad's going to happen if you don't.
Exactly.
Right. So let's talk about the effects of that. If we have the rule in place for ACA, that was the kind of thing keeping it all together was the fact that it had to be mandated in order to assure that everybody had insurance. We could do this on economies of scale.
It's kind of part and parcel, right? So one of the popular things about the ACA is the fact that you can't hold somebody's pre-existing conditions against them anymore. Well, insurance companies said that's fine, but you can't create a system to where people wait till they get sick and then want to get health insurance, because it doesn't work like that. You have to have a distribution of risk. You need young, healthy people in there to help subsidize the costs or the medical loss of those who are the heavy users. One of the issues ACA has had is there's about a 33% watermark. You need to have about 33% entering the exchange, kind of the 26 to 32 young and healthy. And they're not getting there. They're at 28, 30%, depends. And what happens is, if you don't have enough young, healthy people, then the medical loss, which is what insurance companies call when they have to pay out, is higher than what they predicted. So then they have to counter that by raising premiums. So now with the repeal of the mandate, or the penalty in the mandate, I should say, there's estimates all over the board. So the Congressional Budget Office is saying in the next 10 years it could be up to 13 million. But like the S&P and Global are saying it may be only 5 million. And I would think it's going to be somewhere closer to 5 to 8 than 15, and here's why. The research is showing that between the carrot and the stick, the carrot for the subsidies and the stick to require, the carrot's a much bigger incentive. People want insurance, right? But the problem is affording it, and especially 75% of the people in the exchanges are getting some form of subsidy. Right. But those other 25% are not. And if you're not getting a nice subsidy, you are feeling the pain of that increase in your premiums in the exchanges.
That's true. So if you're fortunate enough to get one of those, well, not fortunate, you wouldn't be fortunate if you qualify for a subsidy.
If you qualify.
But if you qualify for a subsidy, then you can actually get it at an affordable price.
Depending on the subsidy, but
depending on how that goes. Yeah.
Yes.
Gotcha. So as far as businesses go, this year everything's pretty much the same, is it not? Like as far as last year, like the individual mandate's gone, but the business mandate is still in place.
All the requirements are exactly the same on the employer end. The only thing that has changed on the employer end is that there is no more, as I previously mentioned, there is no more transition relief. Okay. Which means that they are no longer given a grace for not. So in years past, those with 100 or less employees were given a grace if they did not file their ACA forms. Gotcha. Again, there was rules that were along with that, but it was a fairly significant group of people that were able to take advantage of this. Sure. That's no longer the case for 2017. Okay. Getting on my ears.
So technically, if you don't file this year, if you have between 50 and 100 employees, then you're risking penalties.
Yes, you're subject to the penalties for this year for not filing started around $3,000 an employee. Wow. And that is assessed on a month-to-month basis. So you're looking more at around $188 and change per month per employee. Gosh. So for a lot of businesses that fall within that 50 to 100 range, that's their entire business.
Right.
So it's not something that they're willing to risk.
Yeah, that's huge. Now with the current situation, and we kind of got into this a little bit about the fact that premiums seem to be going up, the number of insurers in each state seems to be getting lower. So I mean, what kind of effect is that going to have? I mean, especially with the individual mandate, it seems like the healthy people are not going to be as likely to sign up for insurance.
Correct.
And with these combination of factors here, it looks like this thing's going to be imploding on itself if there's not some kind of.
What we've seen is insurance companies originally marked the premiums too low.
Right.
And they've had an adjustment. So the question is, last year when you had a big jump in it, was it a one-time jump or not? The fear on one side and maybe the strategy on the other, depending on how you look at it, is what you call a death spiral. Yeah. Right. So as long as the young people stay out, the people who actually need to use it are in it. Costs will continue to increase so much it'll create literally a death spiral to where over time the markets will fall apart. That's a theory, but it is certainly something we have to follow because it is a likelihood in long term. The issue is there's going to be a lot of pain and suffering inflicted on people. Right. We've talked about this before. I would personally rather see them either fix it or just do away with it and come up with something new. But the slow bleed. That's true. Nobody wins and everyone loses.
That's true.
And it seems to be the strategy right now.
That's true. Yeah, it does seem to be that the people wanting to fix it seems to almost be a small minority because you have one side on the far right wants to completely repeal it and replace it with something different, and on the far left you have repealing it and
replacing it with something different,
with something more universal.
Correct.
Instead of more private control or state control. Or whatever.
It's interesting because President Obama actually stole this from the Republicans. Right. The ACA. It was the Consumer Protection and Something Act of 1994, and it was the Republicans' answer to Clinton Care.
Right.
And brought in the marketplace and talked about individual responsibility and requiring you to purchase it. And it's interesting how politics has shifted over time with that. Yeah. So I mean, even like Strom Thurmond here in South Carolina was a co-signer of that bill, and I would not say that Strom Thurmond's considered uniquely liberal, right? But there's certain provisions that weren't in there with the Medicaid expansion, right? But about 75 to 80% of it was literally taken off the rack. Right. But a different name was put on it, different time and place, And I guess Republicans have different ideas, and so do Democrats. Let's be honest. The liberal wing of the Democratic Party was against this just as much as the conservative wing in the Republican Party.
Right, because it didn't go far enough.
Didn't go far enough.
Yeah, right. So, I mean, when you look at it critically from a larger perspective, it's quite what we have in place. The ACA currently, is far different than a universal plan.
Yes.
Because you're still buying insurance. It's not the government buying.
You're buying private insurance, right?
You're buying private insurance,
Correct.
but you're required to do it. That's the sort of socialist part that people don't like.
Right.
But it's also very different than the former system we had, which people might need to be reminded wasn't that popular either.
Right,
I mean, where people were constantly being refused coverage and things like that.
Well, I've always said this is the last ditch effort before we had to make a major shift. Either way. The insurance companies actually were big proponents of this, as long as there was not a government plan that you could purchase into as well. And that was part of the original plan during the campaign, and of course, they politically would not work.
Right.
So this is, if you looked on the political spectrum, this is center left, right? But one of the issues is it really doesn't change that much of our actual system we have. It just forces more people into the system, and it does set up new regulations, right? And some of these regulations do add costs.
That's true. That's true. So as far as that, minimum essential coverage, for example.
10 different minimum essential coverages.
Right.
Obviously, the pre-existing, the raising of the cap from $1 million to $2 million, which is a big deal. That's a vestige from the 1970s. 1 million in 1970s, that takes you for your life.
Yeah.
These days, and I wrote down a few numbers.
Right.
A child with leukemia would take 10 doses of a certain drug, and it's $100,000 per dosage.
Wow.
Right. That gets expensive. There's a cystic fibrosis drug out there that costs $259,000 a year.
Wow.
So if you have a child in NICU, or if you have some cancer that lasts a long time, you would run out of that $1 million quickly. So they've raised that now.
So explain that, the $1 million cap, just so everybody's
Sure, so
clear.
$1 million cap is a lifetime cap.
Yeah.
So after but insurance would spend $1 million on me, they would no longer insure me.
Oh, okay. So they're $1 million and then they're done.
I'm done.
You're on your own.
I'm on my own.
Okay.
In the 70s, it didn't really matter. These days, it doesn't happen to a lot of people, but to the people that it does happen, it's a really big deal, and it's an insurance. But it also means the insurance companies are at risk for more medical loss. So you get a benefit you may or may never use, but it does increase the cost of those premiums.
Now, something I did see in the news recently was there was some it wasn't an actual proposal. I think it was just an idea floated out, I think, by the president about, these kind of like more simple insurance solutions that like didn't cover very much but would be much cheaper. I mean, that seems like where we were, where we were. Like you could buy a really cheap plan. It covered almost nothing, but at least you had insurance and it was not ridiculously.
And we have one state getting ready to challenge the federal government. The state of Idaho, the governor said he would allow plans, and Blue Cross of Idaho just submitted to the state for approval of 5 plans.
Okay.
And some of these plans may not cover maternity care, right, or pediatric care.
Gotcha.
They do put back a $1 million cap. One of the things under ACA is there is a three times limit. You cannot charge the sickest more than 3 times than the healthiest. And that did make it more expensive for the young and healthy. But for the older, it made it less expensive. They're doing away with that and replacing it. If the standard is, let's say, 1,000. If you're young and healthy, you can charge 50% less. If you're older or sicker, you can charge 50% more.
Wow.
Which means younger people will be able to get a cheaper plan. Older people will be paying a lot more.
Wow.
Whether this holds up or not, it's going to be an interesting judiciary case, but they're pushing forward with it.
That's interesting. It does seem to be a trend, though. I mean, I guess it's a reaction to the fact that insurance is just getting more expensive for a lot of people. So they're thinking, oh, we got to have these little cheap plans that are going to be more affordable and cover less things.
So it's a risk, and you're also starting to separate people. Again, you're removing the healthy people from those insurance
The healthy
plans.
people are going to do those things, and then when something horrible happens, they're not going to be covered.
They're not going to be covered, and then those who are in the more comprehensive plans are going to be paying more.
Right, they're going to still end up paying for it.
Right, and yeah, they will.
Yeah.
You know, I always tell people, you know why health insurance premiums are so expensive?
Yeah.
Because healthcare is expensive.
Because healthcare is expensive. That's true. That does seem to be the huge underlying thing among all of this is the fact that healthcare is getting expensive. And I mean, honestly, it's more expensive here than most other countries.
We spend twice as much per capita as the OECD, Office of Economic Cooperation and Development, median. The question is, are we twice as good, or are we twice as healthy?
Are we living twice as long?
Is that what it say? Is that what the assumption is? The assumption is that we pay more because the quality is better?
I don't think the statistics bear that out. Okay. There's certainly areas that we're very good at. You know, I saw a statistic the other day, and we give more, you know, CT scans, MRIs, have more access to that than any other country except Japan, which is a statistical anomaly. Yeah. Where other countries you may be waiting for a while, right? So, I mean, there are certain benefits in access. Right. But if you look at actual outcomes on almost most measures, we certainly aren't twice as good. And in a lot of cases, we aren't in the top 5%.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's something to think about for sure.
So is there a happy medium? Is that something that can exist? Can you have, I mean, under the assumption that healthcare is going to be expensive regardless, is there somewhere where we can lie where, you know, you feel like it is advocating for both the younger population and this quote unquote sicker or anything like that? I
don't tell people there's a better system out there, right? Because better is
subjective.
It's subjective.
Yeah.
Right. It's a state of opinion.
Right.
There are more efficient systems out there per dollar spent. You can go left to a single payer. You can go right to high deductible plans to where you are more responsible with health savings accounts, right? And if you have the money to put in health savings accounts to make you a better shopper.
Yeah. Are there really good examples, though, of that in the developed world of something on that side, though? I mean, like, because I mean, you can look at other examples to see how universal care is working out. But like, as far as developed nations go, I mean, with the sort of, you know, process that we currently do have in place, there's no other real examples.
No, most other countries do consider access to health care more of a right. Yeah. And we don't, right? It's a right if you can afford it. Pay for. And you know, you'll hear people, well, you're not denied health care in the end, right? You can show up to a hospital, but you have a law called EMTALA. It's Emergency Medical Treatment Active Labor Act. So a hospital emergency room has to screen you, and they have to treat you if it's a true emergency, heart attack, gunshot, you know, terrible car accident. You're in active labor, right? But let's say you go in there and you have cancer. They'll screen you and they'll tell you have cancer, but they're not tied to treating that cancer.
They don't have to
until that cancer evolves to a point where it's almost about to kill you and you hemorrhage, and then they have to treat the hemorrhage. Yeah. So you do have access to a degree, but it's also a reason why your emergency rooms. Right. So Pat, 1 out of 11 visits to emergency room are actually emergent. The other 10 are non-emergent rooms. Right. And it's the highest cost access point you can enter the healthcare system, which leads to our cost.
Yeah, that's true. And somebody else is going to end up eating that somewhere.
And it's called cost shifting. Right. You and I pay for the uninsured. Now we just do it indirectly. Right.
That's wild. Now, with when you think about the different, you know, insurance options out there, you know, it seems like in America the preferred health plan to be on is an employer-sponsored plan.
Yes.
I mean, you know, if you're in the marketplace, they're going to provide minimal essential coverage, things like that. If you can be on Medicare, Medicaid, those are good too. But it seems like, for the most part, you want to be on an employer-sponsored plan. Yeah. This is an argument. I have not really heard an argument for it, but with the new tax cuts and things like that, say business is booming, unemployment's dropping. Right. Is we going to see an increase on people on these employer-sponsored plans, or is that's just a huge, you know, pipe dream?
I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, more people in the workforce. Yeah. But if they're in small businesses, less than 50, you probably won't see
There's
it.
no
right?
mandate, yeah.
Over 50, then I think that there's a chance. But here's the problem: insurance companies are trying to shed this cost. Now, the overall large group plans increase in 2017 was 3.7%. This year it's 4.3%, as opposed to those in exchanges where you're seeing 25%. Right. But they have the unique ability to distribute that risk amongst many people. Right. And they're also moving towards more high deductible plans and cost shifting down to where you have to pay more out of pocket to control those costs.
Right.
But the idea that it's going to be a boom and everyone's going to go back to group insurance when the insurance companies the large employers would love to be able to shed that cost.
Right.
I don't see that as a long-term solution.
One side that wants universal, we got another side that wants to repeal and do something else that hasn't really been defined yet.
They didn't think they'd actually get to a point where they could repeal it. Let's be honest, right? They never had a plan.
Right. Well, they came very close. I mean, recently, but yeah, exactly. I mean, there was that was still a reconciliation bill, was it not? I mean,
correct.
That was so it wasn't technically a full repeal and replace of something else. So, yeah, I mean, we still haven't really seen what it is. So, what do you think? What do you think the future's going to hold? I mean, is it going to be like more state control? Is it going to be more a different plan? Is it going to be just ACA rebranded as something more Trump care, something like that, or what? I mean, where can we go from here?
Before we get into that, may I ask? Can you go into a little bit more what it would look like, or what is being proposed state control would look like?
Oh, good. Yeah.
Basically, to let the states to allow what their essential benefits are, what the states. And there's an argument for it, right? The population in Alabama is a good bit different than the population in Montana, and they probably have different healthcare needs and so forth. So allowing the states to set the rules and regulations of which those people are in. Here's the issue. Let's say 49 states have really strict regulations. Well, Alabama or Mississippi goes in and says, we're going to do away with all these regulations, put bare bones minimum, right? There's nothing to stop a company from North Carolina purchasing that Mississippi Blue Cross Blue Shield plan for their people living in North or South Carolina.
Right.
And then, so they're saving money. Well, it is state specific, but I have Blue Cross Blue in South Carolina, but my doctor's in North Carolina. So you can cross those lines. You can buy Blue Cross in Mississippi, but as long as they accept your insurance, you can do it. So, yeah, they can set their own regulations, but right now you can actually buy insurance. The idea was under Trump's plan was to allow you to buy from whatever state, let the states compete, drive down the marketplace, and then businesses could buy from whatever state they want for their employees, as long as the people who are doing the care will accept that payment plan. Right. And they always have the right to deny it. Right. They don't have to accept it.
Right. Okay. So that's moving back to the whole going back to kind of like the old system, but allowing people to buy from across multiple states.
Right. That was the idea. Let you buy from anywhere across.
And that would drive competition, and that would in turn lower prices on health insurance by being more competitive.
Correct. But it also, it actually could increase your bureaucratic structure. If you look at Medicare and Medicaid. Yeah. Medicare is a federally run program. Exactly. Right? Medicaid is a state-run program that is federal and state. So with Medicare, you kind of have a one-payment system for everyone across the country, kind of one bureaucratic structure, one head. Awesome. With Medicaid, you have 50 different regulations, 50 different rules. You have 50 different Medicaid offices. Yep. And that adds a lot to bureaucratic costs.
Gotcha. So there's a lot to think about.
There's a lot to think about. You asked me what I think healthcare is going to look like in the next 5 to 10 years. Complete stagnation and utter chaos under this political environment, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean,
and chaos drives cost up.
Yeah, no, that's true. There's absolutely no indication in the political sphere of any sort of compromise or anything on either side.
And you're right, on either side.
Yeah.
That was, I guess, was going to be my question: is do you think it would be any less chaotic if we had a different dominant, so if the Republican Party wasn't the dominant, or if it was on the other side, would it be less chaotic, honestly?
I don't know. I mean, Democrats were in control. They did get ACA passed, but there's a lot of other issues they're barking about now, which they did not address.
Right.
I think if Republicans maybe had a different leader in there, one a little more kind of could communicate clearly what this is my vision, this is what I want. But that's not what people wanted. They wanted somebody to come in chaos and take a stick of dynamite and blow it up. And sometimes when that happens, you get people who don't know what direction to lead in or go in. And I fear that's kind of where we're at right now.
Yeah, well, yeah, I can't imagine it would look very different no matter who was on top, because the attitudes of each side are still the same.
It's just divergent, and each side's moving to the extreme.
Right.
Not to get into political science.
Sure.
But we have moved to a point where our politicians now select their voters, not the voters selecting the politicians. So you have to run to the extremes on the left and extremes on the right in those districts. And I don't think it's long-term a very good place to be.
All right, cool. Well, we'll end on that bleak note. Hope is lost. Negotiation.
I'm still an optimist.
Futile.
I'm still an optimist.
All right. Well, any final thoughts then? Final thoughts. I mean, Jarissel, any thoughts on like reminding folks about ACA or things like that? Or?
No, absolutely. I mean, if you have not started filing, please do. Those the penalties are just they're not gone yet. Despite all of the changes and despite all of the turmoil that's been going on in Washington, the rules are still the same on the employer side.
Absolutely.
And it's not something worth risking. So that would be probably my biggest message to those looking to file or having to file.
Correct. And I would actually echo the same thing. Understand when they talk about the mandate repeal, it's only on the individual market, not the business side of it. One final thought is that the subsidies are now set where they're only going to increase small percentages every year. So subsidies are going to increase like this. Your premiums are going to increase like this. So over time, it's going, even those who are getting a subsidy, it's going to become more and more unaffordable for them.
Interesting.
It's a short-term solution.
Short-term solution. Yes. We need a plan for the long term. Well, this has been an interesting conversation. I thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
It's been helpful, and don't forget to file your ACA, everybody. Thanks for joining the Bandit Room. Stick around next week and see what we're talking about.